If you're a business owner and you ever look to scale beyond just a small team of maybe you and 2 or 3 other people, then leadership is going to be vital for your success, growth, and fun inside of your business. At BAD, we have nearly 200 people working for us. I'm going to show you in today's video a private leadership training I had with my internal boardroom and managers and directors across my company at BAD. I'm going to talk about the agreements and contracts we make with ourselves and our team members, how we start to make decisions when the decision seems really hard to make, and what we can do as leaders to start empowering others and ourselves to better perform at work and have more fun doing it. Today, I'm going to talk about two different concepts. And ideally on these calls, we don't get to meet as a leadership team. This is really kind of the first time we've done something specific like this. And so I would encourage you, as we have these going forward, please make sure that you're being present, that you're on time, and that you're ready to lean in and take notes. This is our time to invest into you and to try to help you develop and become a better leader and a better manager, right? And I hope that each and every one of you, as you're here, as you've decided to be a leader inside of this company, that you hold that with high conviction. Because at the end of the day, I don't know about you guys, but man, the boss or the manager that you work under in a company makes such a big difference for your experience working and living on a day-to-day. I have definitely had those managers in my life to where, man, I show up and I am nervous to go to work just because this person just gets me every single time, or man, I do not feel like this person supports me, or I feel like this person belittles me. And so for you guys, while sometimes we can lose sight of the impact that you carry and the impact of your voice on the people that work around you, what I've always heard, the good quote is like, for a leader, even your whisper is a shout, right? And so the people around you, it's so important that we take our roles as leaders seriously. And so leaning into these meetings is going to be super important. The next most important thing is that realistically, we can talk all day long about principles, but without application, without action from these meetings, they mean nothing. It's wasted time. And so respect your time enough to where, man, whatever we talk about on these meetings, even if something like I don't fully align with, it's like, I'm never going to leave one of these meetings and not have something I go implement, or something I go action, something I go and try, right? And so while, you don't have to take the whole piece, I'd encourage you to always be like, all right, what's the 1 or 2 things that I can take from this meeting and I can go test out and see how it goes, right? And the cool part is each and every one of you are going to lead differently, are going to communicate differently to people, are going to behave differently to other people. And that's also necessary. If we had a company full of leaders just like Ashton, this would not be a great place to work. And it's because there's a difference in the leaders that are around our company. That's what really makes this a cool place to be. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about 2 different things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is agreements. And then I'm going to talk about decision making. And agreements is something that's been more and more interesting for me to kind of think about, because like you, I know one of the most frustrating things that happens as a leader is when it feels like we communicated clearly and we communicated correctly and we tried to be as thorough as possible to make sure that no one had questions, and then people don't do what I asked. So frustrating, right? Or, man, I feel like I'm giving so much grace, but man, they're always showing up to meetings late. Or man, every time I assign a task, it's never given to me on time. Those things can be so frustrating. And so what I want to do is try to tweak the perspective that we have on due dates, that we have on expectations, that we have on meeting times. And what I mean is I want us to start thinking in our heads that when we are communicating with our team, or when we're communicating even with your leadership, the people above you, every time we are communicating on doing an action, we say we're going to do something, we are actually making an agreement with that person, right? We are making a contract with that person. When you set a meeting time, what you are essentially doing is setting an agreed upon contract with the person you're talking to. So as a team, when Eddie or when Isaac or when Fredo or Julian or anyone in this company, when we're talking of like, hey, let's have a meeting, the pod meetings at 8 a.m. in the morning, what we're actually saying is, hey, we all have come to an agreement and a contract that we will be at this meeting at 8 a.m. And when people do not show up on time, they're showing up at 8:01, they're showing up at 8:02, while we might think that they're just not showing up on time, They're actually breaking an agreement with you. They are actually breaking a contract with you. More so when you don't show up on time, when you're not turning in things on time, when you say you're going to do something, but you don't, you are breaking an actual agreement with the team, right? And they are breaking something with you. And so if we can start altering our perspective here of the seriousness of what these things do, this is where we start to get a better culture. Sometimes when you're a leader and it feels like culture is starting to go downhill or things feel a little bit unorganized, most of the time the culture or things started to slip in the little things in the company. The little things that we don't take as seriously or we don't have proper context for what it actually is. It's when we start letting those things slide, when we start letting those things be under the rug and thinking it's not a big deal, that's when the holistic, bigger picture starts to go out of control, right? So when we see it start to see a degradation in culture, when we start to see, man, the excellence of my team does not feel as on point, most of the time it's come from something that's considered small. And because it's considered small, this is start to build habit and routine, right? And so the agreements that we make as leaders is super, super important. So here's how you start to handle these. Because as leaders, it is our role to maintain a standard of excellence, right? I know recently I was on a coaching call with one of you, and we were talking about even the comparison to people like Elon Musk, right? Or how do coaches set great standards? How do they start building these championship level teams where they're always winning? Right. And so the question was like, man, how do you get other people to do that? For some reason, like I'm in it, I'm working my ass off, and they don't seem to be doing the same. Like, how do we actually fix that? As leaders, you are in charge of controlling this and building this level of culture and tenacity and hunger inside of your teams. And the way you do this is not by changing the people and who they are. We cannot do that as leaders. We do not have the ability to change someone internally to become someone different. But what we must do as leaders is set a standard and expect that standard to be met. And the only way that you'll actually develop the cultures that you're looking for, the work environment, or the team that you're looking for is by setting a standard and expecting that standard to be met. And either they will rise to that standard or it is your role as the leader to ensure they are moved out. Because a culture is something that we expect. It sounds weird because you can't really say that publicly. You can't really say that on the front end of culture is what we expect. But as leaders, it is something that we must expect. Because what we're doing is we are cultivating an environment. Our job is not to build people, although as leaders, we want to empower and develop them. But our job is not to build. Our job is to cultivate. Our job is to put a nice railing around it and ensure that everyone is set up to win. But they are the ones who must also play in the game. Right? It would be so weird if Tom Brady was like, I've got to build a wide receiver. That doesn't make any sense. But it is his role to expect what his receivers need to do, how they need to perform, how they run the plays, and it is their job to fill into that lane. Right? And the best leaders will be the ones who can understand when someone cannot operate in the function that they need to operate in for them to win the championship. And when they cannot, it is the leader's job to, hey, this person will not help us build what we want, right? Because I know where we need to go. I know what the players need to do. It's not my job to do it for them. It is my job to ensure that they are empowered to do what they need to do, but I cannot force them to do it. So when we're bringing in team members, one of the things that I'm always saying is like, when I'm bringing in a team member, it is so important. It's like, listen, if you are here, it is because you said you want to be a part of the best team in the game. You've said that if you are here in this company. And so therefore, my job as a leader is to steward that. And when I allow other team members or even you, when I allow you to shoot below that standard, then I am deserving you as the leader, because we have all made the promise that if they are here, they're working with the best. And we are the best team in the game. And if we are ever performing below that standard, if we are ever not being the best team in the game, then as a leader, if I allow that to happen, then I am doing a disservice to everyone as the leader. There's this quote that's really, really good. I love it. It says, the first time something happens, you have a problem. The first time you have something happen, you have a problem. The second time something happens, you're the problem. I'm going to say that again. The first time something happens, you have a problem. The second time something happens, You're the problem. It's a hard one to stomach because as a leader, it is our role to ensure that we are taking action. It is not our team's role that they're taking action. But as a leader, when we see something happen, hey, things are going to continue like that. That's just business. That's just life. Things continue to happen. However, if we as a leader do not step in to correct, if we do not step in to coach or to develop, or do we not find a way to solve that problem, the next time it happens, it is our fault. We're the problem because we're the ones who didn't take action. We're the ones who didn't plan a new strategy or adapt or develop or give correction. Right. And so it's so important that when it comes to even the little things, your meetings, due dates, someone said that they were going to do something and they didn't, we have to start realizing and making sure the team understands the gravity of what those things actually are, because it's not just you were late to a meeting, it is you broke an agreement. This week, what I'd encourage you, some of you have teams where this is a problem. Some of you have situations right now where you're consistently seeing the same small things happen over and over again. This week, I'd encourage you, you need to have those conversations with your teams. And maybe it's something similar to this, reminding them, hey, I want us to come back to a standard of excellence that I know we're all capable of achieving. We all want to be the best. Yes. We all want to make sure that our clients are getting the best results. Yes. Great. We all want to make sure that we're playing on the best team. Yes. Amazing. Then therefore, there must be standards of excellence that we have to follow. And that starts with our meeting times. That starts with when you're on a meeting, you're paying attention and you're not, I'm watching your eyes dart around to 20 million different screens and you're not actually here. It also means that you're turning tasks in on time. It also means that you are doing your reporting the way you should be, you should be doing them. Bringing teams back to this, but also anchoring in the idea that, hey, we all made an agreement even the first day that you were here. We made the agreement of what we wanted to be. And realistically, as a leader, I have to call us out, me included, that we have not been achieving that standard of excellence. And I have been breaking an agreement with you because as the leader, my job is to ensure that you're in an environment that stewards the best possible team. And that means these things have to happen, right? So agreements is super important. When someone breaks something, it's not just a missed task or a mistake. It is we agreed upon something, and then we did not fulfill on the agreements we promised to. Starts there. This is so much of what leadership or great culture or anything is the little things. Doing the little things correctly is what ultimately leads to the best outcome. Walt Disney was the same way. He went hyper over budget. Example, they thought Disneyland was going to take about $2 million to build. It took about $17 million to build at the end of it, which equivalent to today is like $180 million. And it was why? It was because all these little things, all the tiniest things inside of the park, he refused to cut corners. He wanted real leather instead of fake leather. He wanted the scaffolding on top of the castle that no one would ever freaking see, but he wanted every detail perfect on that scaffolding. And it cost so much over budget. And people are like, why are you doing this? No one's going to ever see this. No one's going to ever do this because it was unlike anything else. There were no theme parks before. There was just like carnival rides. Or there's, amusement parks, but there was no theme parks. And it's like, why are you doing this? No one's going to ever catch this. And it's because for him, it's that one little thing, sure, but it's the compound of excellence over and over and over again across all little things. That's what ultimately makes Disneyland Disneyland. And it's the same thing for us. Yes, we might think a missed meeting time is a small thing. It's one thing here or there. Or yes, this task we half-assed, but it's just one small thing and the client's never going to know. We're never going to know. We didn't follow SOP process because like we got it done anyway. Don't worry about it. Like even though we didn't do SOPs, just like we got it done. It's okay. I correct us and say if we truly actually say we want to be the best, it is the compound of every little thing that we do correctly. That is what makes us bad. That is truly what makes us great. And so for some of you, might need to go back and correct that with our teams, get realignment here. Cool. Next, let's talk about decision-making. I saw this actually inside the comments for several of you, which is a big thing. As a leader, decision-making can be very difficult, right? Because there's all different kinds of decisions that we might have to make. And decision-making is ultimately, as a leader, something that we have to continue to develop and steward, because our teams count on us not just to make decisions, but make the right decisions. Yeah. And so I'd say there's kind of like really two things here. Someone asked me recently this of when things feel cloudy, how do you make decisions? There's kind of two ways I go about this. So the first thing is when I'm trying to make a decision, I first ask myself, why do I feel like it is cloudy? There's two options here. Either A, the situation is cloudy, and B, I as a human am cloudy. So either A, the situation is cloudy, or B, I as a human am cloudy, meaning my thinking is cloudy. If it's the situation, there's really two things I have to try to focus into. And most of the time when it comes to problem solving, I'm always just trying to reverse engineer, right? So if I want to achieve X, what must be true, right? So in this situation, if it's a situation is cloudy, there's kind of really two areas I go to. Is it either A, do I have all the proper information needed to make this decision? And B, what is it that I actually want? Because A, if it's do I have all the information needed, sometimes we're trying to make decisions off of a lack of proper information, right? We're trying to take a few pieces of information that we might have, and we assume that that is enough to make an actual good decision. A lot of the times it's not. We're missing something important, right? Easiest way to ask yourself or to find that out is there any piece of information that I could have that would make this easy? Meaning, is there something that I don't have right now? But if I did, it would actually just make this a super easy decision. And this is where you just kind of like shot in the moon. It could be anything. What is it? And it's like, actually, is there just this one thing? Like, I'm trying to make the decision off of this limited view. But actually, if I just knew this, like, it would all be easy and like the decision would be simple. Right? That's a great indicator of like, okay, it's just information. Right? The second thing, though, is like, what do I actually want? So many times as leaders, because we're the problem solver, everyone's dependent on us, right? And so they put us into a problem and we just start like tunnel vision, like, all right, solve, 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 solve. This is what I have in front of me. And sometimes we actually need to take the step back and just be like, what do we actually want? What does this team actually want? What are they actually trying to do? Or what is the client actually trying to achieve? Right? Because sometimes we'll get so caught up in the lane that our team put us in this trail, or other people had put us in this trail and like, hey, go solve this problem. Like, this is what we need you to fix. But if we take a step back and actually ask, what do we really want? We'll realize that this is the wrong tunnel to even be in. It's actually over here. Because like this stuff is just kind of like, it doesn't actually matter. The solution is actually over here. All right. So understanding what do we actually want, and then looking at that, you as the leader sometimes are going to be forced to snap everyone else out of it, because they'll get very tunneled. And as the leader, sometimes you'll have to be the one of like, I don't know if you guys have ever kind of been like on a trail, or it's like someone gets lost, right? Like you're getting lost and like, man, we're trying to navigate through the woods and like we're just walking in circles. Like, what happens? And then there's that one person who just climbs the tree and is like, yo, our shit's actually over there. We're fine. Sometimes you're going to have to be the person to climb the tree, because other people are just going to be focused on what's in front of them rather than just trying to get altitude. So the two questions: do I have all the information? And what do we actually want? If it's a me thing, so now it's not really a situation is cloudy, it's a me cloudy. First thing I'm really trying to ask here is that, ironically, what do I want to achieve? Is the first question. It's a me thing. It's what do I actually want to achieve? The reason I say that is because sometimes we don't actually know what we want, and therefore everything around us feels cloudy. It doesn't matter what decision we make. It doesn't matter what action we take. If we don't actually know what we as a human want to achieve, then everything can feel cloudy, because nothing really has purpose or meaning behind it. The next thing is, do I have enough margin to make a decision? See, in work, and this is where it gets really tough, especially for leaders in high performance environments and habits, like you guys are high performer people, to make a big decision, or to make decisions, or to be able to give yourself room to think, you have to have margin, right? And so the problem here, though, is that we will operate at 100% capacity all the time. And then something random will come out of nowhere. And for some reason, we think we have to like make it 120% to make that decision. As leaders, ultimately, in the ideal state, and this won't always be maintainable. Sometimes you're going to have flux here and go up and down. But as leaders, the best place you guys can operate at is about 85% capacity. It is so interesting in my career. as I've moved up and I've really realized I get into a great rhythm of leadership. I'm not always in this rhythm, but when I'm in a great rhythm of leadership, you'll be surprised because you will start to feel senses of boredom. And then you'll feel guilty about those senses of boredom. But this is the ultimate position of what a leader should be doing, because a leader must maintain a level of status, of steadiness, because your greatest driving impact to the business is your ability to make decisions. But if you're always operating at 100%, then you'll never have the margin to make the decisions when they need to be made. When the random fire comes up, that your team's like, oh crap, now we got to really adapt. We got to pivot. Like, what do you need to do? But you're already operating at 100% and you have no margin to give your team clarity of thought because you're already maxed out up here. But when you're in a really good spot in leadership and you're delegating properly and you're putting yourself in the position to observe, overview, analyze, think ahead, and strategize, you will be around the 80 to 85% capacity. And that leaves the margin for when something comes up, which in the agency world is all the time, but it leaves the margin for when those things come up, you have the room to expand, right? Now, again, it's super weird because I had to battle this for a long time because I was always the person who did everything. I was doing everything by myself. I was jumping into everything all the time. And when I finally got into a place where I was actually delegating properly, I was actually having the system set properly, I felt bored. And then I was like, man, I feel like I'm a failure to the team because like they might feel like I'm being lazy. They might feel like I'm not doing that much, or I just don't feel like I'm doing that much. And that feels lazy. And then I feel convicted. And I'm like, man, I got to just find projects and spin things up to make sure I'm staying busy. But your role is to make sure you have a clear head. Because when a battle comes, they need to know that their general is making clear decisions. And if all he's doing is on the front lines on the 5-front war, there is no way that you can make a good decision. And the worst part about this is this is where you truly start to burn out the team, because you're going to make a decision because that's what you do and that's what people depend on. And then you're going to realize like that maybe wasn't the best decision, or now your team's starting to get burnt out. And then it's like, oh shit, now we got to make another decision over here. And then now your team is losing faith in you and they're getting burned out. Your team, if you are a good leader, they will fight for you and they understand how to fight. They know how to push the extra mile, but they have to know that as you, as the leader, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Even if they can't see it, they're going to trust your eyes that you see it. But if you are putting yourself into a spot in a tunnel where you can't even see the light at the end, man, that's when a lot of faith and a lot of drive starts to burn out. So decision-making is super important. There's a cool concept I was studying recently, and this is something that I think could be cool to try. This is something that I'm going to propose. But this is a concept from Jeff Bezos and how they run Amazon on big decisions with his leadership. Okay, so this is kind of like their decision-making processes, and specifically when it comes to meetings. Meetings are super important. Right? They say this: when two people are talking, the need for efficiency is important. When a team is talking, the need to be efficient is paramount. The reason for that is when you have a team talking, like on these meetings or in your pod meetings, when you have a team, the importance for efficiency is paramount because it is compounded, right? When you have one person, other person, it's important because you want to get stuff done. But when you have a pod meeting or you have a group meeting, every single lack of efficiency is compounded by every single person on that call, right? And so it's super, super important. So here's Amazon's path, or here's Jeff Bezos's way of trying to increase efficiency, especially when it comes to decision making, right? So first off, he requires that any time that there is an important decision to be made, or there's a critical issue that the leadership team is supposed to come together on, whoever is sponsoring of that issue, of that problem, is required to create a draft document outlining the problem, the analysis, the context, and some proposed solutions. All right, so it doesn't have to be super in-depth, but it's very, very important. Whoever is owning this solution, the ultimate outcome that we want, or whoever identifies the problem, that is the sponsor of the meeting. And their job is, before this meeting is set, that person creates a draft of what is the problem, what is the context, and what is some proposed solutions. And then that doc, that draft, is sent around to any attendee or participant of that expected meeting. Okay. and is allowed that they can give comments, they can give counter arguments inside of that draft. Okay, and that gets passed around before the meeting. Now, here's where it starts to get really cool, I think. So that gets passed around, meeting set. Everyone sets up on that meeting, right? Everyone attends this meeting. And the first thing they do when they get to this meeting is they all read and go through that report together. Why do you guys think they do that?
It gives everybody the necessary information, gets everybody on the same page first before discussing.
Yep. How many times do you guys like, hey, I sent this out, review before the meeting. Let's show up to the meeting ready and let's dive in. And we're all fucking busy. And then we show up to the meeting and you're like, first 10 seconds, you're like, skim, right? Because you don't want to feel behind, right? Because it's realistically, it's like, oh man, we're busy. Like we just didn't have the time to review this document, right? So the first thing they do on this meeting when they have this solutions meeting is everyone will go through, they take 10, 15 minutes, put the timer on, everyone go through the documents. You didn't carve out time before, now is your time. Go through this document, and then we'll actually begin the meeting after we've all reviewed, so 10, 15 minutes. Right? Then on that meeting, once everyone's read it, they'll start going around, and the goal is essentially who has counter arguments to this, who has feedback. That's when they actually go into problem solving mode. And on that meeting, essentially, as they've read the drafts together and any proposals that someone has placed, then essentially whoever the sponsor is of that meeting, if there is no solution created on that meeting, that person is ultimately they're in charge of making sure that they decide what is the solution. But there is no solution on that meeting, or if there are questions that are still there, then they will assign 2 people for research, and then they will schedule a decision meeting. So this is really powerful, namely because I think one thing that's super important I want to encourage us to do is, as leaders, it is so important that we create clarity for other people. I think sometimes we can overestimate other people's ability to review information, complex problems, and think of solutions quick. Some of you, this is a superpower of yours, and you can do this really, really well, and we kind of assume that other people can do it the same way that we can, right? So as leaders, I think it's really important that even before we schedule a meeting, while it goes, oh, this is going to take me extra time as a leader, what Amazon and what Bezos had discovered, it is so much worth it for the sponsor, the leader who is trying to find the solution, to take that extra time to create a draft document of the problem, of the context, and of proposed solutions, and delivering that to other people beforehand. This happens even in marketing campaigns and ideas. I can't tell you how much more efficient and impactful our campaigns are that I've ran in my experience when I've taken the time and I've created a mission doc of the campaign idea, what I want it to do, what the market is, what the links are, like taking the extra 20 to 30 minutes and putting that together before I tell the team what I want us to go do on a meeting or a Loom video. It drives so much more impactful results. And it's the same way when it comes to decision making and finding solutions. As leaders, we must be the ones who take ownership of making sure our team has clarity, making sure that they understand the problem and the details correctly, right? So when we're trying to do something, or I'd encourage this so much so with your clients, is when we have a client in the red, or when we have a promotion we think we need to carry out, are you taking the necessary steps to be very, very thorough with the team? Or are you taking the shortcut of, I'll just tell them what to do on a meeting, and I'm going to assume that they are thinking like me? Take the time to flesh out the clarity on a doc, right? But then I think it's really important that as you have that doc, I think it's so great that we start going, hey, for the first 5 minutes of this meeting, we all have this doc, or we all have this proposal. Let's read it here now, because I know you've probably been busy, or if you have checked it, you gave it minimal effort. This is the time that we've already carved out on the calendar, full focus on this. And then move in to solutions, right? Super important. What I also think this will help with is, so many times on calls, you probably have like 2 or 3 people that are engaging, and then everyone else is silent. This is probably because they lack the context that they need to actually pitch in to the conversation. But if they, at the same time as everyone else, had the same level of clarity and context, you would probably be getting a lot more out of your teams. Because now there is no excuse but also they're going to feel empowered to contribute because they have the context, right? And then I loved this final piece from this, is the idea of a decision meeting. Not a brainstorm, not just a random meeting, not a check-in. This is a decision meeting. Because by this point, we all have context. We all have counter proposals submitted. We all have seen or had the chance to add comments. So on this meeting, we are making a decision, and it is all about action. Who's doing what?
Ashton, is that meeting separate from sort of the efficiency draft that you created meeting?
The efficiency draft. Yes. If a solution hasn't been come up with on that call.
Got it.
So the decision meeting is only scheduled if by the end of that call, then a solution has not been found or there's more questions. If there is more questions, it is the job of the sponsor to assign, okay, we are clearly missing the proper information that we need here, which again, back to the information side, we clearly don't have the information. You are responsible for going and getting this. You are responsible for going and getting this. We will schedule a meeting on this date. We will all show up. And I think it's super important that as leaders, we are not just delegating the task needed to make a decision to one person. Sometimes we just have that trusty person that we just like know gets it done, right? And so we kind of lean a lot on those people. But I promise you guys, the more we can start assigning things to multiple people, this is how your team will feel more like a team, right? Because they're all a part of the solution. And now, not only are we solutions, not problems, but now we're all taking extreme ownership. It is not up to you to solve every problem. You might have to make the decision, but there is a difference between being responsible for making the decision and responsible for coming up with a solution. There's a vast difference between those two things. And I think as leaders, sometimes we take both of those and we put those on our shoulders. And this is not good. Because A, our team, if they work here, they should be capable of doing it. And realistically, a lot of them probably want to do it. They just haven't been given the opportunity, right? But B, you as a leader will burn out if you always take all of that weight on your shoulders. As leaders, what we want to do is we want to create teams where information flows up. My job is to make sure I'm making clear decisions at all times, right? Realistically, like if I lose clarity and I lose confidence and I can't think clearly, that is the biggest disservice I can make to the entire company, because that's what you guys are counting on me for. And so as a leader, my job is to ensure that I build the teams, the systems, the processes as good as possible to ensure that the information flows up to me, that at all times I can make a proper and clear decision. You guys are the same way, and you have teams. How are you organizing your team to make sure you are on the mountaintop and are able to make clear decisions at all times? Right now, if you're in the weeds in a lot of areas and you feel like, man, it's so hard for me to even think ahead to next week or next month because I'm just in the weeds, or man, if I want information, I've got to go find it. And so like I almost avoid those projects because I just know I'm going to have to go find a bunch of stuff that like I don't have access to. If that's how you're feeling, you got to start making a plan of how do you turn that around, because ultimately what you want to be able to do is at all times remain clear. And anytime a situation comes up with a client, with a team member, with a project, with a campaign, whatever, it's not that big of a deal because you have enough margin. Because your role is like steady here, information flows to me, I synthesize the information, and I direct the team and repeat. And that's really where we want to get to. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. This is going to take a while and it takes time, it takes practice. But this is ultimately where we want to get you guys if you're leaders, because this is actually how you empower others. Because all of this is just talking about how we make you make better decisions. But we're not even talking about the next phase, which is you have to create enough margin to where you can make all clear decisions, but now also empower the team. If you don't even have the margin to make clear decisions for yourself, you definitely don't have the margin to develop your team, which means you could be getting a lot more out of them, and our clients could be getting a lot more out of us, but they just don't have a leader that can invest into them and develop them. What questions? What questions do you have?
I got one, Ashton. I hear you, and ask anybody on my team, like, I'm a very dangerous person when I take a flight because nobody's bothering me. I have like 2 to 3 hours to think. Right. So like I want to create that margin, but it's really, really easy to say and understand and agree with. But like, how do we do that? Because I'm about 40% away from having that margin that I need.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is to understand that A, it's possible, right? Because A, you're taking a flight, which means it was possible at somehow that you took a flight, right? So the first thing is the second thing is also understanding too that you recognize how dangerous you are when no one's bothering you, which also means you know how dangerous you could be on a day-to-day basis, but we haven't taken any action steps to put you in a dangerous spot. Okay. So that's the first thing. It's just like, okay, I know I have to solve this because, man, if I can solve this, when I do solve this, my team is going to get so much more out of it. And so is my division. All right. So that's just kind of the first thing, is anchoring in the importance of it. Ultimately, though, it can come down to a couple different areas. Either A, how you're scheduling days, right? B, what is the task that you're actually focused on? It's probably the main two things, honestly. It's probably just those two things. How you're scheduling days, and then what are the projects that you're actually focused on? Now, one of the cool practices that I'll do, it was timed think. So if any of you have read The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, probably top 3 or 5 favorite books of all time. But The Road Less Stupid talks about this practice of timed think. For me, it used to be every Wednesday. And so I would essentially take time, and then all it is throughout the week, each week, you would keep a notepad or somewhere that you would just keep these questions or problems that you need to solve, right? And timed think is essentially where you give yourself a very constrained thought, and then you take, basically, you can space out the times that you do. For me, it was like 20 minutes. So basically, you have these pre-thought out questions, and then when you go into timed think, you would pick 1 or 2. Most of the time, it's only going to be 1, but you make it very constrained. So, for example, right now, you need to create margin, right? And that's your big thing, right? So my constrained question might be, if I only had 3 hours a day to engage with my team, meaning I could not talk to my team at all outside of 3 hours a day, what would I do to ensure that they never dropped a ball? It's a very difficult question. It's not one that you're going to be able to come up with an answer with, right? And so when it comes into timed think, you would set your timer, no phones, no computer, no distractions, pen, paper, and you brain dump on this concept of a constrained question. So if I had 3 hours a day, only 3 hours, and then outside of that, I could never talk to them, what would I need to do in those 3 hours to make sure they never, ever dropped a ball? And you just start brain dumping. What are all the things? And you just start coming up with these random ideas. And the craziest thing is about the brain is just when we give it a problem, it is very, very fucking good at solving it. The problem is most of the time we are not giving it the proper problems to solve. And this is a practice. Your brain will get better over time as you do this. But in the beginning, it might feel a little weird, might feel a little tough. But the more constrained, the more difficult of a question you give your brain will just naturally start trying to solve it for you. And a lot of times you'll find answers. But that would be kind of like an example of the first one I would encourage you to do.
Kind of just building off of that one thing too, because I agree with the timed think. I've also built in for our entire team regards position to have like that timed growth session once a month set aside on their calendars. And I've also found that helpful as like a leader, because it is also empowering them to bring more to us as well. And we, again, want to think people will do it, but just having it in their workload built out already has been something helpful as a leader, I guess, to get more ideas brought to the table as you're trying to do your own timed things as well. So just something we've found helpful too.
Super valuable. In fact, like even at Apple, even for their retail workers, every Friday, a part of their shift, or once a week, a part of their shift, they have an hour where it's literally designed, hey, you go or are focusing on these feedback questions or these questions, and that gets passed to leadership, right? And it's in their time blocks, it's scheduled, and something that's probably good for us to think about. Sometimes we just go like, hey, we all need to do this report, or hey, we want feedback here, and then we just expect them to find their own times to do it. But honestly, if we want great work and attentive work, we have to block it for them. Just like, why should we read the document at the beginning of the meeting when you can all read it beforehand? Sometimes it's just, if you want focused attention, you got to work it in. Cool. Victor asked, decision meeting only for people assigned to make the decision or for everyone? I would say it depends on the situation. Realistically, for me, it's all stakeholders, meaning based on this decision, who would all be affected? And I would try to have those people on the meeting. Now, this meeting can be very short. Again, it's a decision meeting. It's not about brainstorming, asking more questions. All of that should have been done beforehand. So this meeting is realistically 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because this was the decision. This is what we're doing. This is action items that we have from this, right? So that's what I would do.
One of the main things that I struggle with is that I know that my team is bottlenecked if I don't review the work that they've done, send it to the clients, communicate all of that with the clients, and then get them back the revisions. So I'll have days where I'm super focused on developing out our CRO strategy and not focused on review. And then it comes to the end of the day and I have 10 different tasks that all need to be reviewed, but don't have the mental bandwidth to do that. So the next day I'm trying to review everything, get them back the feedback they need on time while continuing to build out the next task and the next strategy. So I never feel like I actually have any time to help my team get what they need and also make sure that I'm focusing on solving different problems. And that's come up repeatedly. Like I've wanted to set up coaching calls with them to educate them more with CRO, but then it's, okay, now I need to find the time to actually set up the information I want to share on these coaching calls, and that falls through the cracks. So when it's a situation like that, where I know that I'm the one bottlenecking my team, if I'm not following through and reviewing stuff for them, but that's also bottlenecking me, how would you suggest going about balancing out that time better or solving that problem?
The true answer is a more of a tougher one to stomach, is that realistically you are bottlenecked right now because you lack the ability to allow other people to make a proper decision. Like, why are you the one right now that has to review? Well, ultimately it's because right now you probably lack confidence in the ability for anyone else to review it and to maintain your standards of excellence. And so realistically, you know, one of the quotes I've heard is like, great leaders delegate tasks. The best leaders will delegate decisions. But because we have not trained or developed our team enough to make those decisions properly, that means that we're the only one that can make that decision. One of the cool concepts, and this is kind of one of those things as a leader, will understand that there's going to be like pinch points, which means that for a season, it might be extra difficult, but if you can get through that season, it's going to get a lot easier. And something that I think is really cool that like even Toyota does, right, is where the Kaizen method is like they have teams reviewing teams. So it's like in the beginning, what if you could have a sprint of where, okay, these two people I think are really promising and show potential. All right, when something happens, I want you two to review each other's work. And then if you've caught nothing, then send it to me and I'll review, right? But I want to see over time if they can start reviewing and catching the mistakes so that when it gets to me, I start seeing less and less and less mistakes and eventually no mistakes, because I need to get to a point to where I'm not having to review every single piece of work. Right. And so even copywriters right now, I'm like, okay, before you send me this copy, I want you copywriter and you copywriter. I want you to chief each other's ads. I want you to chief each other's emails, call out, critique, blah, blah, blah. And I want to see the final version, but I don't want you to delete any of your comments. I want to see what comments you guys made. I want to see what iterations you guys have made, but I want to start seeing this. And they're forced now to review back and forth. And they're almost being hypercritical because they know they're going to have to both send it back to me. And it's not just the work that I'm going to be reviewing. I'm going to be reviewing that other person's critiques. And this now allows me to mentor two people at one time. But eventually it gets to the point where now I don't need to review copy because they've gotten so good that they now know how to review. And then they'll just always review each other's work and I don't have to anymore. Right? Like that's kind of how I'd start thinking about your situation.
Thank you.
What else? We got 2 minutes.
Going back to your example, using Jeff Bezos' method and like forcing people to really look at what you've asked them to on a call. How do you find the sweet spot between trusting your team and their self-motivation and us like saying that we are the best in the game at what we do, and also like hand-holding and micromanagement? Because I would not assign something to my team and then also take meeting time to go over what I've already assigned them. I'm trusting them as a part of this team to have the self-motivation to get that done. So how do you find that balance between that?
You wouldn't take this for any task that you just apply. Like I wouldn't apply a meeting to any task. This is mostly for when the company needed a decision made or there's a big problem that they're trying to address. This is how they go about solving that problem. For us, so it's like probably either a problem or a solution that's come up or a process error that's come up, or we have a new campaign or a launch that we need to do. That's when I would take the time, put everything on a doc, and then, hey, you know, I have this thing that we're going to do. We need to have a quick meeting to go over this document I've put together, and then let's ascend from there. But yeah, you wouldn't just, you know, hey, I assigned a task. Let's now have a meeting based on that. That wouldn't make sense.
More so like if you ask your team to do something and then you force them into the time frame of also doing it while you are like one-on-one with them or actually doing the task, whatever that may be, even if it's a big problem that you're solving. Why wouldn't you hold your team accountable to do what you've asked them to do prior to coming to that meeting? Does that make sense?
Like review a document before the meeting, and then you take time in the meeting to review the document?
Yeah.
I think it's because there's a way that we would like to assume things are, and then there's the way things actually are. Simple example on this call, you guys are all amazing. You guys are great, right? But for me to give you a document and to assume that every single one of you, let's say, has gone through that document with attention, that you weren't focused on 13 other things at that time, and you gave that document the proper respect it needed, and then show up to this call ready to deliberate on it, man, what a heavenly world. But as a leader also, I have to understand that's probably not likely. And so would I rather take the extra 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to make sure all of us have had undistracted attention on this thing we want solved? Yes, much better as a leadership move, right? Now, here's the thing, though. When it feels like it comes to a character issue or a culture issue, which is seeming like a little bit more what you're talking about, that's when it's more of, again, of like you as the leader, are you upholding the standards that you expect? If you have this notion inside your head, and you'll have to check yourself of like, am I having a false read on my team? Am I being poisonous to them? But it's like, if they truly are like seemingly lazy or seemingly like they're half-assing stuff, that's a thing of like, you as a leader, are you going to tolerate that? And that comes with either addressing it and trying to like, hey, do I have the wrong perspective? This is how it feels. Like when you show up to meetings or and you're doing your task, this is how I feel. Am I missing something here? But if it's clearly just them, it's also your role as the leader to move that out of the team and get them replaced with other people that will follow that culture. Because if you don't, it's a poison. It'll poison the rest of your team if you allow it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
If I may.
Yeah.
Something to a buddy of mine is a senior level designer at Amazon in their design department. And something that they have a decision on too is the leader of the meeting isn't necessarily the one that makes the final call. They make it as a team. And if they fight and if they get to the point where they aren't coming into an agreement, they literally have an internal arbitration team to where they go into court mode and they will battle for their idea full on attorney style. And it's something that's really important that I think it's not when we say we want to make a decision, it's okay if we all, or at least the way I think about it is I don't come in necessarily knowing what I want to happen. I want the best decision to be made. And then if we need to fight for it and we need to get scrappy in that decision meeting, we get scrappy.
Yep. Not being afraid of conflict is super important. Teams that don't fight are teams that don't trust each other at the end of the day. It's when you see good spirited debate, respectful debate, but when there's debate, that means that someone trusts someone enough to give their true feelings and opinions and know that like they're just trying to solve a problem. Right. And so it's super important to not shy away from it. That's a more tactical thing that we can talk about of like, how do you encourage spirited debate, or how do you like oversee and manage that to make sure that your teams aren't being counterproductive? But it's good stuff, guys. We're out of time. Thank you so much for attending. I've taken all of your points down, so I'm really excited to have these keep going. Feel free to let us know your thoughts if this was helpful, valuable, but take something from this, go implement. Cool.
Thank
you, Ashton.
Peace.